giving long answers to short questions, guys. Okay, well, let's move on into the second portion of this. Let's talk about really managing this multi-generational workforce, but I want to focus on this recruiting and retention piece because that's the main challenge that we're seeing, and we're going to keep seeing, all right? So we get questions about the multi-generational workplace with some frequency. People wondering about what is it like, how do I go about managing millennials, you know, or what's going to happen when all the baby boomers retire as they've started to, you know, what's important to them. So let's frame that up a little bit. What are we talking about? Well, the workplace is now shared between 5 generations: traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. Those traditionalists, although there are few and fewer all the time, there are still a few of those that are not technically boomers who are in the workplace. But really it's those last 4, boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. And Gen Z, born kind of early mid-90s to 2000s, already make up the largest percentage of the global population. So they're going to continue to impact the world. Here's another way to look at this. You know, roughly, and I mean, these are kind of fluid, right? About the only one that's a harder date is the start of the baby boomers. You know, World War II ends, here come the baby. And, but the rest, there's some overlap. So there's kind of different ways to define it. But that's really what we're talking about. And people talk about having challenges with managing all of these, especially if you are in this category and you've been working for a long time and you are used to how things work, right? And you're used to a certain way of doing business. And you have some folks come in who are doing it differently, right? And they don't see it the same way that you see it, right? And that might get in the way. So how do we manage these? How do we accommodate this and make it something that's workable in our organizations? Well, I want to do a little bit of an exercise first and take the pulse of the room. And I'm going to put up a few statements here, okay, about generations. And I'd like to hear, people's interpretation of generations. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on which of these most resonates with you relative to describing millennials, okay? So which of these sounds most to you in your experience like dealing with a millennial workforce? The traditional yearning for a benevolent employer who can provide a job for life also seems to be on the way. In particular, they want to avoid, quote, low-level jobs that aren't keeping them intellectually challenged. Okay. Another thought. Probably there's no period in history in which young people have given such emphatic utterance to a tendency to reject that which is old and to wish for that which is new. They think they know everything.
See.
So,
Pretty unanimous.
which of these do you think feels most like, best describes millennials? A. B? C? Yeah. So here's the part where I destroy any goodwill that I have in the room, right? Because this was all trick questions. First one was from an article titled Meet Generation X from the Financial Times in 1995. Right? These Gen Xers don't want a good employer to take care of them. They're just gonna bounce from place to place. B, young people drinking. It was in 1936, all right? I don't know about the drinking. Maybe it was like the Depression, there wasn't much else to do, so that's why they're drinking more. But these young people, they don't care about anything that's been going on. They only want the news. They think they know everything, they're always quite sure about it. That's our friend Aristotle. So, I give you credit for the article. The point being here is that there is a long, rich history of older people complaining about younger people. Right? They don't value anything, they don't care, you know, they don't want to work hard, all they want to do is drink apparently, right? This has gone on for a long, long time. And in the workplace context, I think that we should remember that. And oftentimes when we start talking about younger generations, we can slip into this trap, right? Let's talk a little bit more about some of these myths and facts, and I'll go through these relatively quickly. About Gen Zers, they see their work as transactional or motivated primarily by compensation, right? They just go from job to job. All I hear about is how the boomers took all the money, so they're trying to get all the money they can. Of all the age, and I should mention, this actually came from a study that was done by McKinsey and Company, interviewing the different generations, trying to figure out their preferences. What they actually found was, of all the age groups, Gen Zers are the only respondents who do not cite inadequate compensation as a top reason for leaving their current jobs. They prioritize career development and meaningful work, where compensation. Millennials, a myth that millennial employees prioritize work-life balance more than all the other factors and all the other generations, right? It's gotta be about me, it's gotta be what's good for me. When taking a new job, younger millennials, those 25 to 34 at the time of the study, which is just a couple people, value workplace flexibility no more than workers in all of the other age groups, and not as much as compensation or career development. Gen Xers, when making the decisions, they are most motivated by those traditional factors, the job security, plug them in there, and stay with the place. They want to know that they're not losing that job. Gen Xers value meaningful work as a top reason for staying at their current jobs, and uncaring, uninspired leadership as a reason to leave. And the boomers. Baby boomer employers care most about the transactional elements of their work experience, such as pay, benefits, opportunities to get ahead, stay with the company, work with the company for years, get that house in the suburbs, right? Younger baby boomers cite caring leadership and meaningful work as two of the main reasons why they stay in a job, or when those factors are missing, why they leave. The same as Gen Zers on the other end of the spectrum, right? So we've got these myths that start to evolve about the different generations and about how they work, what's important to them. And I think that we can do ourselves a disservice if we fall into that trap. There are tendencies that come from these generations based on shared experiences, absolutely, right? Having to talk to my kids about what a rotary phone is, you know, those kinds of things, and that informs our work. At the same time, I think we would be better served, instead of thinking about what year they were born, and even necessarily what age, let's think about where they're at in their career, okay? Because I think that's a better corollary for our work as employers. I really like this graph provided by the SHRM Foundation about major career stages, and they lay out 5. 1, getting started. They just graduated school, figuring out what the work world is about, right? Usually kind of early 20s, mid-20s. Stage 2, launching a career in earnest. They work for a few years, they're starting to make progress on a path. Maybe they've even been promoted to a first level manager position. Late 20s, early 30s. Mid-career, they've got several years of work experience in a particular occupation, and now they want to, maybe they want to move along a managerial path, or maybe they're deciding they want to become really the subject matter expert. They want to be the best technician of whatever this is, and that's where they want to live. So they're thinking about that. Mid-30s, early 50s, and then we move into stage 4, late career. They achieved most of the promotions that will occur in the long run at the top of their professional accomplishments. An approximate age, late 50s through the 60s, like they're starting to look towards retirement. And then you've got the kind of retirement, bridge jobs, secondary career, you know, kind of the executive who now is retired and said, I was going to work in a flower shop, but now I work in a flower shop 3 days a week, and it's wonderful, right? So that kind of thing. But I really like this because I think this speaks better to how people may interact at work. And maybe to illustrate this, how many 20-year-olds do you have beating down your door to talk about your retirement plan? Right? I'm guessing that people start to really get interested in retirement probably more around here and here. You know, it'd be great if all of them were talking about, like, sign me up for the 4-3 right back now. I want to max out the match, all that stuff, okay? But that doesn't happen, right? And I would wager money that the answer to that question was the exact same 10 years ago, and it was the exact same 20 years ago, okay? And is that because Gen Zers don't care about retirement, or because millennials don't care about retirement, or Gen Xers don't care about retirement? No, I think it's because 20-year-olds, by and large, are not thinking about retirement, okay? And so I think that helps to illustrate our point that it's less a generational tendency oftentimes in the workplace, as it is where they're at in life, where they're at in their career. The other benefit of thinking about it this way is, we're talking here about approximate age range, but this can apply at different stages to someone's life. Maybe they had a later start, right? Maybe someone graduated from college, stayed home to take care of kids. Now they're in, they're 30 and they're really just starting their career, right? So they're not here, they're here, okay? And so we need to think about that. Similarly, what's really important to this person in terms of pay, in terms of comp, in terms of workplace flexibility is probably going to be different to this person or this person who's staring down the barrel of however many kids in college, right? Now security has started to become more important to them. Retirement is on the horizon. I need to make sure that I have things shored up. This person is living free and easy, right? And some of us over here are like, oh man, that was great. But it's different for them, right? You have different things that are going to be important to you at different stages in your life. So I would encourage us to think less about exactly how boomers act or Gen Xers or whatever, and maybe think more about how these people are relating to the workplace at this stage in their career. Because the big takeaway, I would say, relative to managing generations are people, right? If you really want to understand what's important to your people, talk to your people, okay? And people are people in that they are going to change throughout their lives. And what is important to them at one stage of their life is going to be different at another stage of their life. So engage your people, talk to them about what's important. I think the thing to think about with generational tendencies they are a nuance of employee engagement. They're not a shortcut to engagement, okay? It is not, here's how you act with boomers, right? This is what's important to boomers. This is what they value. It is, okay, if I'm gonna have to ask boomers about something and conduct a survey, I'm not gonna do it like via TikTok or Snapchat, right? Like they're probably not on those, okay? And that is okay. We should find a way that these folks are and connect with them, and vice versa. So you can think about it that way, and you can adapt it, but don't use it as a shortcut to engagement, as a way to assume. And since we are HR professionals, I will give you kind of like the compliance perspective on this. Of if we're not careful, we can get ourselves down some roads that we don't want to go with making some assumptions about age categories, okay? Age is a protected class under state and federal law, okay? And so if we start making assumptions about what boomers want, what Gen Xers want, what millennials want, all of them who are over 40, that could be a problem, all right? Especially if we start talking that way and we start making management decisions, assuming what is important to those people, because that could have disparate impacts for people in those age categories. So we'd want to watch out. I think another way to think about it is just think about other age categories. Like, we wouldn't sit here and say, you know what Asians want in the workplace? This, right? Do you know how you recruit women? That, right? Here's how you talk to the LGBTQ community all the time. They all think this way. Those are 3 protected classes, right? I would not stand here and tell you as a HR professional to go make those decisions and talk that way. So I would not recommend you do it that way about age, all right? These are nuances that I think we should consider, and they should kind of inform maybe how we implement our strategy, maybe how we interact with staff, but we should make sure that we're keeping everybody on the same page and treating everybody fairly and equitably. And really the best way to manage our folks is to engage with them, find out what is important to them. So that kind of brings us down the home stretch about recruiting these generations, retaining these folks. So I said at the outset, it's a very competitive labor market that we're in. That's softening, but it's going to stay the case. So how do we compete for folks? How do we make sure we get the best people in our organization? In light of these generational tendencies, I would first start by looking in, right? Keep the folks you got. So focus on retention first. Maintain that current staff. It's gonna reduce your recruiting need. It promotes the organizational culture. It preserves the organizational knowledge, right? I mean, when that person leaves, it's more than just the inconvenience of now I gotta go hire and try to find somebody, right? Depending upon how long they've been there, they probably just took a lot with them, right? So I'd focus on retention. And you need to understand what is valuable to your workforce, tailor your engagement and total rewards strategies accordingly. So what do I really mean by that? Well, if we're trying to figure out if people value workplace flexibility versus compensation versus the type of work they do, right? Ask them, right? Stay close to your direct reports, have those regular conversations, do employee engagement surveys, maybe you have some town halls, virtually or otherwise, get that feedback and then share it with them, because that demonstrates that you heard them. Okay? A few other points about managing this multi-generational workplace. According to AARP, 7 out of 10 adults polled said they like working with people from other generations than their own. And they found that mentorship is one of the most effective ways to build a multi-generational workforce. So are there, you don't necessarily even have to have a formal mentoring program, maybe you do, but are there opportunities to pair those seasoned employees who have a lot of organizational knowledge and do things the way that you want them done with some of your newer folks? And say, here's a project to work with on that. See how they do it. Pair them up a little bit. And there's going to be a lot of interaction and learning that just happens by them working together, being side by side. So a few strategies relative to actually recruiting. You can tailor your recruitment and retention strategies to each generational work stage segment. Eric, you just said a second ago, like, don't treat them differently. No, I want us to think about those nuances and think about how maybe we're recruiting and how we're connecting. So really, a lot of that comes down to messaging and channels in which you're engaging with employees, okay? So a lot of folks in the world are still on Facebook. Depending upon what it is, if it's an entry-level position, maybe you also look at some other ways that you're able to advertise on Instagram or something like that, Snap. But if you're looking for a more seasoned employee, somebody who's in that kind of baby boomer, probably later stage, is probably not looking there first and foremost for a job. Create inclusive job posts. Sometimes we can unwittingly include language in there that older workers will say, well, they don't want me, We need somebody who's a self-starter, who's gonna bring a fresh perspective, without knowing, you may be turning off a segment of the population. We can reword that to talk about the work ahead and talk about how we benefit from somebody who's got the experience that we want. And design that inclusive application process, ensuring that the messaging throughout the application process is friendly, welcoming, simple, easy to understand, consistent. Conduct inclusive interviews with a diverse interview panel. So I would have people who have been long-term employees, people who are kind of mid-range, people who are newer. They're all going to give you different perspectives, and they all have different understandings of what it's like to work in your organization. And then review your employer brand to ensure it's attractive to all generations. If you're trying to get experienced, seasoned employees, but everything seems like it's all focused on the new, the young, like your older workers may start to think, well, this might not be the place for me. Right? Maybe I'll find someplace that I fit in. A lot more that we could unpack there, but in general, those are some things to think about as we start thinking about managing these workforce generations. So what all comes down to, I think, relative to managing the generations is engage with your folks. Recognize that they are people, and they are going to change. There are going to be different things important to them now than a few years ago and a few years forward. Talk to them, stay connected to them. That's going to be the best info. So with that, I think I will wrap this up and see what questions